I woke up that Tuesday morning with butterflies dancing in my stomach. Not the bad kind, the excited kind that comes when something important is about to happen. Ethan's graduation day had finally arrived, and I'd been planning for it like it was my own wedding all over again. The night before, I'd spent an hour making sure his cap and gown looked perfect. I even steamed out the wrinkles twice because the first time didn't seem good enough. My navy dress was hanging on the closet door, freshly pressed with the pearl earrings my mom gave me laid out on the dresser. I'd practiced my congratulations speech in the mirror until it sounded natural, not like I was reading from a script. Everything felt like it was coming together after years of watching Ethan struggle through high school. He wasn't the straight-A student his younger sister Emma had been, but he worked hard for every grade. Seeing him walk across that stage would mean everything to our family. David barely touched his coffee at breakfast. He sat there scrolling through his phone, answering in short sentences when I tried to talk about the ceremony. I figured it was work again. His construction company had been dealing with some big contract issues lately, and he'd been bringing that stress home more often than usual. "You excited about today?" I asked him while packing snacks for after the ceremony. "Yeah, sure," he mumbled without looking up. I decided not to push it. Some people handle excitement differently, and David had never been the type to gush about emotions anyway. We'd been married for 22 years, and I'd learned to read his moods pretty well. Or at least I thought I had. The drive to Lincoln High took about 15 minutes through our neighborhood in Springfield. We passed the Dairy Queen where Ethan got his first job last summer, and the park where he used to play Little League. I pointed these things out to David, trying to share the nostalgia, but he just nodded and kept his eyes on the road. When we pulled into the school parking lot, I could see families streaming toward the main building. Everyone was dressed up, carrying flowers and cameras, looking as proud and nervous as I felt. The May sunshine made everything look golden and perfect, like someone had planned it just for us. That's when I spotted Ethan near the gymnasium entrance. He was adjusting his cap in a window reflection, and when he saw us walking over, his whole face lit up. My heart just about burst right there in the parking lot. "Mom, Dad." He jogged over to us, his gown flowing behind him like he was some kind of academic superhero. I hugged him tight, probably too tight, and took about 50 pictures before we even made it inside. David shook his hand and patted his shoulder, but something felt off. He seemed distracted, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. The auditorium was packed. Our extended family had claimed 2 full rows near the middle. My parents, David's parents, his sister Karen with her husband and kids, plus a few cousins who'd driven down from Chicago. Everyone was chatting and laughing, passing around programs and comparing notes about which graduate they were there to see. That's when I noticed her. She was sitting with David's family, right next to his mom, looking completely comfortable, like she belonged there. I'd never seen her before in my life. She was younger than me, maybe early 30s, wearing a beautiful cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my car payment. Her dark hair was perfectly styled, and she had this confident way of sitting that made her stand out from the rest of us. I leaned over to David during the opening remarks. "Who's the woman sitting with your parents?" He glanced over quickly, then looked away. "Just someone I know from work." Something cold settled in my stomach, but I pushed it down. This was Ethan's day. Whatever was bothering me could wait until later. I turned my attention back to the stage and tried to focus on the principal's opening speech, but my eyes kept drifting back to that woman, wondering why she was there and why David seemed so uncomfortable about it. The ceremony felt like it lasted forever and no time at all. I watched dozens of kids walk across that stage, but when they called Ethan Michael Rodriguez, everything else disappeared. My son, my baby who used to be afraid of the dark and collected Pokemon cards, was walking across that stage like he owned the world. I cried. I didn't care who saw me. David's mom passed me tissues, and even his usually stoic dad was wiping his eyes. This was what family was supposed to feel like. All of us together, celebrating something beautiful. After the ceremony ended, we all gathered outside on the lawn in front of the school. The late afternoon sun was perfect, not too hot, with just enough breeze to keep everyone comfortable. Families were everywhere, taking pictures and hugging their graduates. The whole scene looked like something from a movie about small-town America. Ethan was glowing. He kept adjusting his cap and grinning at everyone who congratulated him. My mom grabbed him for about 20 photos, and Karen's kids were hanging off his arms like he was a celebrity. I stood back for a moment, just watching all the people I loved celebrating together. That's when David stepped forward and raised his voice. "Hey everyone, can I get your attention for a minute?" The chatter died down. About 15 family members turned to look at him, expecting some kind of proud father speech. I smiled, thinking maybe he was finally going to show some emotion about the day. "I've got something I need to say," David continued, his voice steady and clear. "I've been thinking about this for a while now, and today seems like the right time." My stomach started to twist. Something in his tone didn't match the celebration happening around us. "I've decided I want to start over. Start fresh, without some of the baggage I've been carrying." The words hung in the air like smoke. Nobody moved. My mom looked confused. David's dad tilted his head like he hadn't heard right. Then David looked directly at me. "I want a divorce, Susan. I've already filed the papers." The world stopped spinning. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, loud as a drum. Someone gasped. Maybe it was Karen. Maybe it was my mom. Ethan's face went completely pale. The woman in the cream dress stepped closer to David, and suddenly everything made horrible sense. My face felt like it was on fire, then ice cold. My hands started shaking, but my voice came out clear and steady. "Well, congratulations on your timing, David." I reached into my purse and pulled out the letter I'd been carrying around for 3 weeks. The letter I'd written after finding that hotel receipt in his jacket pocket. The letter I'd never planned to give him. Especially not here, not now. "Since we're sharing surprises today, here's mine." I handed him the folded pages and walked away. I didn't run. I didn't stumble. I just turned around and walked toward my car like I was leaving any normal family gathering. Behind me, I could hear the chaos starting. Voices rising, someone crying, Ethan calling my name. But I kept walking until I reached my Honda in the parking lot. My hands were still shaking when I got the keys in the ignition, but I managed to drive out of there without looking back. I made it about 3 blocks before I had to pull over because the tears finally came, and I couldn't see the road anymore. I sat there in the parking lot of a McDonald's, still wearing my nice dress and pearl earrings, crying so hard I thought I might throw up. My phone started buzzing immediately. Calls from my mom, from Karen, from numbers I didn't recognize. I turned it off. 22 years of marriage, Ethan's graduation day, in front of our entire family, with his girlfriend right there watching. I don't know how long I sat in that parking lot, but eventually I stopped crying and started laughing. Not happy laughing. The kind of laughing that happens when something is so unbelievably awful that your brain doesn't know how else to handle it. That letter I'd given him contained everything I'd been too afraid to say out loud. Every sleepless night wondering if I was imagining things. Every excuse I'd made for his distance, his late meetings, his sudden interest in going to the gym. Every moment I'd questioned my own worth, wondering what I'd done wrong. I'd written it all down 3 weeks ago after finding that receipt from the Marriott downtown. A receipt for 2 people, on a night he'd told me he was working late. But I'd never planned to give it to him. It was just supposed to help me process my thoughts, figure out what to do next. Seeing her there today, sitting with his family like she belonged, had changed everything. The letter wasn't just my private thoughts anymore. It was my declaration of independence. I'd written that letter on a Tuesday night 3 weeks before graduation. David was supposedly at another late meeting, and I was sitting at our kitchen table with a glass of wine and a hotel receipt that had fallen out of his jacket pocket when I was taking it to the dry cleaner. The Marriott on 5th Street, room service for 2. A date I remembered clearly because I'd spent that evening alone, watching Netflix and wondering why my husband seemed like a stranger lately. I started writing without really planning what I wanted to say. The words just poured out of me like water from a broken dam. I told him about the nights I'd lain awake listening to him come home late, smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. About the way he'd stopped really looking at me when we talked, like I was just background noise in his life. I wrote about the morning I'd found lipstick on his collar, and he'd convinced me it was from his sister's birthday party, even though Karen hadn't worn lipstick since high school. About how I'd started checking his phone bills and credit card statements like some kind of detective, hating myself for it but unable to stop. The letter was 4 pages long when I finished. I'd written about our wedding day when he'd promised to love me in sickness and in health, for better or worse. I'd written about holding his hand in the hospital when his dad had his heart attack, about supporting him through the lean years when his business was just getting started. I'd written about Ethan's first steps, Emma's first words. All the small moments that make up a life together. The way he used to bring me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings. How we dreamed about growing old together. Maybe traveling when the kids were grown. But mostly I'd written about the loneliness. The way it felt to be married to someone who'd already left, even though his body was still sharing our bed. The slow erosion of trust that had eaten away at everything we'd built together. I'd sealed the letter in an envelope and hidden it in my dresser drawer. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. Part of me thought maybe I'd give it to him someday, when I was ready to have the conversation that would either save our marriage or end it. I never imagined I'd hand it to him in front of our entire family at our son's graduation. But seeing her there today, Claire, I'd learned her name was Claire, sitting with his parents like she was already part of the family, had flipped a switch in my brain. The careful, patient woman who'd been trying to figure out how to handle this situation quietly had disappeared. When David made his announcement, when he stood there in front of everyone we loved and threw away our marriage like it was yesterday's newspaper, something in me just snapped into perfect clarity. That letter wasn't my private confession anymore. It was my response to his public humiliation. If he wanted to air our dirty laundry in front of the whole family, then he could read my side of the story right there too. I didn't stick around to see him open it, but my sister-in-law Karen called me later that night. "Susan, you need to know what happened after you left," she said. Her voice was shaky like she'd been crying. "I don't really care, Karen. He read your letter right there in front of everyone. He opened it and started reading, and about halfway through he just broke down. Started crying like I've never seen him cry before." I sat on my hotel bed staring at the ceiling. "Good. Susan, I think he realized what he'd done, what he'd lost. Mom and Dad are furious with him. We all are. Nobody can believe he did that to you, especially today. Where's his girlfriend?" "She left. Apparently she didn't sign up for public drama and family meltdowns." I almost laughed. Claire had wanted the excitement of being with a married man, but she hadn't counted on the reality of breaking up a family. She'd probably thought it would be cleaner, more civilized. "Karen, I need you to know something," I said. "I'm not interested in taking him back. I don't care if he's sorry now. I don't care if he's realized he made a mistake. But Susan, no. He made his choice. He planned this whole thing. He brought her to our son's graduation and used it as the stage for his big announcement. That's not something you do to someone you love. That's something you do to someone you want to destroy." I hung up the phone and turned it off again. I didn't want to hear about David's tears or his regrets. I didn't want to know about his family's anger or his girlfriend's disappearance. I wanted to move forward, and that letter, the one I'd written in loneliness and pain, had somehow become the key to my freedom. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't face walking into the house David and I had shared for 15 years, seeing his coffee mug in the sink and his reading glasses on the nightstand like nothing had changed. Instead, I drove to the Budget Inn on Route 66, the kind of place truckers stop at when they're too tired to drive another mile. The desk clerk was a kid who couldn't have been older than Ethan, with purple hair and gauges in his ears. He looked at me funny when I walked in still wearing my graduation dress and smeared makeup, but he didn't ask questions. Just handed me a key to room 127 and told me the ice machine was broken. The room smelled like old cigarettes and industrial cleaner. The bedspread had a pattern that probably hadn't been updated since the 80s, and the air conditioner made a grinding noise every few minutes. But it was mine for the night, and that's all I needed. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since I'd turned it back on. Missed calls from my mom, from Karen, from my neighbor Betty, who'd probably heard about the drama through the Springfield gossip network that moved faster than the internet. There were 17 voicemails I didn't want to listen to, but there was one call I had to take. Ethan had been texting me every 10 minutes, and I could tell from his messages that he was spiraling. "Mom, where are you? Please call me back. Mom, I'm so sorry about today. Mom, please don't disappear on me too." That last one broke my heart. I called him immediately. "Mom?" His voice was small, like he was 12 years old again. "I'm here, baby. I'm okay. Where are you? I came by the house, but your car wasn't there. I'm at a hotel. I just needed some space to think." "Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about any of this. If I had known Dad was planning to do that today." "Ethan, stop." I sat down on the scratchy bedspread and kicked off my heels. None of this is your fault. Not one bit of it. But it was my graduation. He ruined my graduation. No, he didn't. You walked across that stage and got your diploma. You accomplished something amazing today. Don't let his bad choices take that away from you. We talked for almost an hour. I told him I was proud of him, that I'd always be his mom no matter what happened between his dad and me. He told me about the chaos after I left, how his grandparents had torn into David right there in the parking lot, how his Aunt Karen had literally slapped him across the face. Grandma Rodriguez called Dad a coward, Ethan said. I've never heard her say anything bad about anyone before. I almost smiled at that. David's mother was the sweetest woman in the world, the kind who brought casseroles to sick neighbors and never missed church. If she was calling her own son a coward, then David had really stepped in it. After I hung up with Ethan, I ordered pizza from a place that delivered to the hotel. Pepperoni and mushroom, the kind David always complained about because he said mushrooms were gross. I ate it in bed while watching old episodes of Friends, trying to remember what it felt like to laugh at simple things. The next morning I drove home to pack a bag. I figured David would be at work, but his truck was in the driveway. My stomach clenched, but I wasn't going to let him keep me from my own house. I'd lived there longer than he had anyway. It was my parents' old place, and we'd moved in after they retired to Florida. Ethan was waiting for me in the kitchen. He looked like he hadn't slept, still wearing his t-shirt from the day before. Dad's upstairs, he said quietly. He's been up there since yesterday. I don't think he's eaten anything. That's not my problem anymore. I went upstairs to our bedroom, my bedroom now, I guess, and started throwing clothes into a suitcase. I could hear David moving around in his office down the hall, but he didn't come out. Part of me was relieved. Part of me was furious that he was hiding. I was folding my sweaters when I heard footsteps in the doorway. Susan. I didn't turn around. What? I read your letter. Good for you. I need to explain. No, you don't. I zipped up the suitcase and looked at him for the first time since graduation day. He looked terrible. His eyes were red and puffy, and he was still wearing the same shirt he'd worn to the ceremony. You explained everything yesterday. Very publicly. I made a mistake. You made a choice. He stood there for a moment, looking like he wanted to say something else. But I walked past him toward the stairs, and he didn't follow. Ethan helped me carry my bags to the car. We stood in the driveway for a minute, both of us looking at the house where he'd grown up. Are you going to be okay, Mom? I hugged him tight. Yeah, baby. I think I am. I found Dr. Martinez through my insurance company's website. She had an office in a converted Victorian house downtown, with plants in every window and furniture that actually looked comfortable instead of like a doctor's waiting room. I'd never been to therapy before, but I figured if I was going to start over at 45, I might as well do it right. The first session was awkward. I sat on her couch and cried for 20 minutes straight while she handed me tissues and waited patiently for me to get it together. When I finally stopped sobbing, she asked me a simple question that knocked me sideways. What do you want, Susan? I stared at her. What do you mean? Not what you think you should want, or what other people expect you to want. What do you actually want for yourself? I couldn't answer. I'd spent so many years being David's wife and Ethan's mom that I'd forgotten I was supposed to be Susan too. I'd made decisions based on what was good for the family, what would make everyone else happy, what would keep the peace. But what I wanted, I had no idea. Dr. Martinez gave me homework. Every day I had to do one thing just for me. It could be small, taking a bath, buying myself flowers, sitting in a coffee shop and people watching. The point was to remember what it felt like to choose something just because I wanted it. It was harder than it sounds. The first week I mostly sat in my hotel room feeling guilty about everything. Guilty about leaving David. Guilty about disrupting Ethan's life. Guilty about not being stronger sooner. Guilty about eating ice cream for dinner and watching reality TV shows David always said were stupid. But slowly things started to shift. I joined a walking group that met at Washington Park every morning. Most of the women were around my age, dealing with their own versions of starting over. There was Linda, whose husband had died the year before. Janet, who'd gotten divorced after her kids went to college. Maria, who'd moved to Springfield to take care of her aging parents. We didn't talk much about our problems while we walked. Mostly we complained about the weather, shared gossip about our kids, and argued about whether the new Starbucks downtown was worth the hype. But there was something comforting about being around other women who understood that life doesn't always go according to plan. Ethan started coming by my hotel room every few days. He'd bring takeout from whatever restaurant he was curious about, and we'd eat together while watching whatever movie was on cable. These dinners became the best part of my week. We talked about everything: his plans for college, his part-time job at the hardware store, his girlfriend Sarah, who was heading to nursing school in the fall. "You seem different, Mom," he said one evening while we were sharing General Tso's chicken from Happy Garden. "Different how?" "I don't know. Lighter, maybe. Like you're not carrying around something heavy all the time." I thought about that. He was right. For years I'd been carrying around this constant anxiety about David. Where he was, what he was thinking, whether he was happy. I'd been so focused on holding our marriage together that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just be myself. David tried to contact me several times during those first few months. He sent long emails that I deleted without reading. He left voicemails that I erased before listening to them. He even showed up at the hotel once, but I had the front desk tell him I wasn't available. Karen kept me updated on his situation whether I wanted to hear it or not. Claire had apparently moved back to Chicago shortly after graduation day. David's business was struggling because he'd been distracted and had lost a couple of big contracts. He'd been staying at his parents' house, which was probably not great for a 47-year-old man. "He asks about you," Karen told me over coffee one afternoon. "I don't want to know. Susan, I think he's really sorry. I think he realizes he screwed up." "Good. He should be sorry. But that doesn't change anything." Karen looked at me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "You're not even curious? Don't you want to know if he's learned from this?" I stirred my coffee and thought about it. 6 months ago, I would have been desperate to know what David was thinking. Whether he missed me, whether he regretted his choices. Now, sitting in this coffee shop in my favorite jeans and a sweater I'd bought just because I liked the color, I realized I genuinely didn't care. "No," I said. "I don't want to know. His feelings aren't my responsibility anymore." That night I sat in my hotel room and made a list of things I wanted to do. Not big life-changing things, just small stuff that had been pushed aside during all those years of managing everyone else's needs. I wanted to take a painting class. I wanted to read books that weren't about parenting or marriage improvement. I wanted to travel somewhere David had never wanted to go. I wanted to find out who Susan was when she wasn't trying to be the perfect wife and mother. And for the first time since graduation day, I felt excited about the future instead of afraid of it. 11 months after graduation day, I found the house. It was a small bungalow on Maple Street, just 3 blocks from downtown Springfield. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that needed updating, and a front porch that sagged a little on one side. But it had something I'd never had before. It was completely mine. The realtor, a chatty woman named Brenda who wore too much perfume, kept apologizing for the house's flaws. The hardwood floors were scratched. The kitchen cabinets were from the 70s. The backyard was overgrown with weeds and had a garden shed that was falling apart. "We could keep looking," she said, scrolling through listings on her tablet. "There are some nicer places in your price range on the north side of town." But I was already picturing myself drinking coffee on that saggy front porch, reading the newspaper without anyone asking me what was for dinner. I could see myself pulling up those weeds and planting tomatoes and herbs in the backyard. The scratched floors and outdated cabinets didn't scare me. They were just projects, things I could fix and improve at my own pace. "I'll take it," I said. Brenda looked surprised. We'd only been there for 15 minutes. The paperwork took forever, but eventually I got the keys. I stood in the empty living room on a Tuesday afternoon in March, holding those keys and listening to the silence. It was my silence now. Nobody was going to interrupt it with complaints about work or requests for help finding their socks. I painted every room. The living room became a soft sage green that reminded me of spring mornings. The kitchen got cheerful yellow walls that made the outdated cabinets look charming instead of old. My bedroom, and it was definitely my bedroom, not our bedroom, became a pale blue that made me think of clear skies. Ethan helped me move in. He'd graduated from high school and was working full-time at the hardware store while taking community college classes. He'd grown up a lot in the past year, become more serious but also more confident. "This place feels like you, Mom," he said while we were hanging pictures in the living room. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. Peaceful, I guess. Like you can finally breathe here." He was right. In the house I'd shared with David, I'd always felt like I was performing, playing the role of the perfect wife and homemaker. Here I could leave dishes in the sink if I wanted to. I could eat cereal for dinner. I could fall asleep on the couch watching old movies without anyone complaining about my choice of entertainment. I started a garden that spring. Nothing elaborate, just a small plot behind the house where I planted tomatoes, basil, and marigolds. I'd never been much of a gardener before, but there was something satisfying about digging in the dirt, about nurturing something and watching it grow. My walking group from the park started meeting at my house sometimes. We'd sit on my front porch with iced tea and talk about everything and nothing. Linda was dating someone new, a widower she'd met at the grocery store. Janet was thinking about going back to school to become a teacher. Maria's parents were doing better, and she was considering moving back to Texas to be closer to her own kids. "You look happy," Maria said one afternoon while we were watching a thunderstorm roll in from the west. "I am happy," I said, and realized it was true. Not the desperate, trying too hard happiness I'd felt when I was married and pretending everything was fine. This was something quieter, steadier, contentment maybe. People in town had opinions about my situation, of course. Springfield was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business. Some people thought I should have tried harder to save my marriage. Others thought I should have left David years ago. I learned to smile politely and change the subject. David's family stayed in touch. His parents invited me to Sunday dinner sometimes, which was awkward but sweet. Karen called me regularly to check in and share updates about her kids. Even David's brother Mike, who'd never said more than 10 words to me in 20 years, stopped by once to help me fix a leaky faucet. "You're doing good, Susan," he said while tightening a pipe under the kitchen sink. "Don't let anyone tell you different." David himself tried to reach out a few more times that first year. He sent a birthday card. He left a Christmas present on my front porch, a book of poetry I'd mentioned wanting to read years ago. Each gesture felt like too little, too late, but I appreciated that he wasn't making things harder than they needed to be. Ethan told me that his dad was doing okay. He'd moved into a small apartment downtown and seemed to be getting his business back on track. He was seeing someone new, a woman from his church who was closer to his age and recently divorced herself. "Does that bother you, Mom?" Ethan asked during one of our dinner dates. I thought about it. 6 months ago it might have. Now it just felt like information about a stranger. "No," I said. "I hope he's happy. I really do." And I meant it. Not because I'd forgiven him or because I wanted him back, but because his happiness wasn't connected to mine anymore. He could be happy or miserable, successful or struggling, alone or with someone new, and none of it would change the fact that I was exactly where I belonged. On the anniversary of graduation day, I sat on my front porch with a cup of coffee and thought about everything that had changed. The woman who'd woken up that morning a year ago, worried about wrinkled graduation gowns and congratulations speeches, felt like someone I'd known in another lifetime. That woman had been afraid of being alone, afraid of starting over, afraid of what people would think. This woman, the one sitting on her own front porch planning her own day, answerable to no one but herself, wasn't afraid of anything anymore.